Happy November. We just went to Albertsons to get some very crucial supplies for the shoot we're about to do. So yeah, November is kind of a weird month in Jackson. Like, it's kind of snowy, kind of rainy. It's not nice enough to do any like biking or trail running, and the Alpine's closed off. So my month looks a lot like that. So I figured if you're gonna know what the heck I'm talking about in future installments of this series, I think I need to give you a bit of a Training 101 crash course. Welcome to my TED Talk. Let's get right down into it. So in order to get you up to speed, I wanted to talk about the phases of training that I'm going to be going through. But before I did that, I needed to talk a little bit about heart rate zones, how they work, how I use them. But before I talk about heart rate zones, I need to talk about cardio, and I need to talk about the way that our body absorbs the stimulus and reacts and becomes stronger from the stimulus of cardio. Before I talk about cardio, I need to talk about what specifically I need to train for this objective that I'm training for. Before I talk about the training stimulus, I need to talk about who the hell is Steve House, why do I worship him, and why do I listen to him? So anyway, that's where we'll start today. Roll the intro. I apologize, I don't normally drink while I do this, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Steve House, who the hell is this man? He is a very renowned and accomplished alpinist. And real quick, before I dive into any of that, let's talk about the difference between alpinism and mountaineering. You know, you'll still find traces of early expeditions on Everest and other prominent mountains because they didn't really emphasize a leave no trace, light and fast mentality. And that right there is the primary difference between mountaineering and alpinism. The primary tenets of alpinism are light and fast. It stresses not adhering to the base camp mentality or philosophy. That was a good one. With alpinism, there's often a point of no return where you get high enough on the mountain that the only way to continue is to get to the top. Because your pack is a lot lighter than in mountaineering and you're not making the same trip multiple times, you can cover a lot more ground. And Steve House was one of the pioneers of the alpinism style. He did a lot of really prominent faces that I can't remember right off the top of my head, and I would read them off, but that's boring. So you should Google him, you should read his Wikipedia article. You should also read the book, Beyond the Mountain. He wrote it. But anyway, Steve House, I'm rambling. That's what happens when this is unscripted. Steve House was one of the first people to think about alpinism as a sport and not an art. Mountaineering and alpinism was really thought of like, oh, if you're a dude and you have a sense of adventure and you can drink a lot of whiskey, then you'll get to the top of the mountain, or you won't and you'll write a book about it and have an adventure, and everyone will think of you as a hardened man. He and his co-author and friend and coach, Scott Johnston, were the first people to implement training philosophies from other sports into alpinism and climbing. I think of climbers as I think of any high performance athlete, but that wasn't the case for a really long time. Woo! That's why this Bible, Training for the New Alpinism, is so groundbreaking, because not only did they develop an entire training cycle and regimen for climbing really tall mountains, but they also shared it with a lot of people. That's Steve House. That's why I listen to him, and that's why I always pray to Steve as Christ every night. What is the training effect? Basically, it is periods of stress where we put our body intentionally into zones of uncomfortability, and then we let it recover. So if you were to look at it, it is a very up and down line. So there's the periods of stress, and then there's the periods of recovery, which are in the little troughs on the line that you see right over there, but the general trend is upwards. The thought is, if you put your body into periods of stress and then let it recover, its resting capabilities will be higher than it was before the period of stress that you put it into. Let's talk about the objective a little bit. The Grand Traverse is a climbing objective, and if you look at it online on the mountain project or whatever, it is referred to as such. However, of all of the elevation gain, the 12,000 feet that I'm going to gain on this objective, 12% of that is going to be climbing. Most of this objective is walking. It's just glorified walking. There will be scrambling over rocks, there will be climbing over rocks, but most of it is just gonna be walking with the pack and the rope that I need for 12% of the goddamn climb. So, I don't need to push my climbing grade. If I do, great, but my priority is cardio. I'm gonna be working on my core, I'm gonna be working on my strength, but specifically, I want my ability to be able to go over long periods of time to be much better than it is right now. With that, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we're back from the break, I will talk about cardio. See you when we return, gentlemen and ladies and folks. Welcome back. We're gonna talk about cardio. Cardio largely refers to when your body is working and exerting energy, and your body needs to take in excessive amounts of oxygen. What it's doing there, what your body is doing when it takes in more oxygen, is trying to produce more energy for your muscles to use to output energy in the form of whatever movement you're taking. That could be reorganizing your Pokemon card collection while jumping up and down. Let's get a little cellular here for a second. Aerobic exercise utilizes lipolysis. Lipolysis, which is basically breaking down fat into ATP. It needs oxygen to happen. When you are in this range of exercise, you can go for hours. A lot of athletes who've trained their low aerobic base, as it's called, can go for up to 48 hours at a time. And that's because your body can store up to 100,000 calories. That's just in your muscles. So this is not extra body fat. This is not cellulite. This is just straight up in whatever muscles you have. Now there's anaerobic as well, which is when you are working at such a high rate. This is like when you're sprinting down a track and your legs get heavy and crampy and you start to feel like the sharp pain in your body starts to transition from relying on just oxygen to also using sugar, which is in your body and doesn't require oxygen to happen. And you can go for an hour or two max on this. It's not something you want to rely on for long periods of time. Why the f is this relevant? I'm gonna get to that. Let's talk about heart rate zones. Your heart beats. I don't know if you know this. In fact, you could probably check your pulse right now and you might be surprised. There's 4 zones roughly within that lovely range that I put up here for you totally in After Effects. The bottom 3 are zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3, and they're the different levels of aerobic activity. Zone 4 is strictly anaerobic. Zone 1 essentially is a really easy pace. It should feel comfortable. You should be able to talk to your buddy or your dog, whoever you're exercising with. You can sustain this pace for hours on end. Zone 2, if you're only breathing out of your nose in zone 1, then at the top of zone 2, it gets really hard to keep doing that. Zone 3 is when your body starts to transition into the anaerobic. So you start to feel the lactate build up in your muscles and maybe get a stitch in your chest, but you're not quite fully anaerobic yet. Zone 4 is like really close to your max, and you can only do this for like minutes, not hours. I spend 80% of my time in Zone 1 and Zone 2. Then I spend 10% of my time in Zone 3, and then I spend 10% of my time at a much lower pace than Zone 1. That's the recovery pace. I don't spend any time in Zone 4. Your Zone 1 and Zone 2 capacity take a really long time to respond to stimulus. Running sprints is not gonna make you a better endurance runner, and so I need to spend just hours on end in those lower zones in order for my overall capacity to increase over time. A lot of people get sucked into the trap of doing high intensity workout intervals because you can burn a lot of calories in a short amount of time, and you really feel like you're spending a lot of energy because you are, like you're sprinting around a track for 2 minutes at a time and then taking 60-second breaks. That's a good way to become Usain Bolt. That's not a good way to become Steve House. Oh my God, home stretch, ladies and gentlemen. Phases of training. We're finally here. Let's talk about it. God, there's so much to talk about. So we're all gonna die. It's the end of the month and I still haven't talked about phases of training. That's my bad. So let's talk about phases of training, let's do some skiing, and let's end this month on a good note.
Say hi! Say hi!
All right, now that we're on the steepest part of the actual hike up, walk with me and I'll explain to you the phases of training while I slowly die. So the first and most important phase of training is the recovery phase. That's basically like you're coming down off of a high period of activity and you notice that your body can no longer keep up the output that you could before. And if you're like me and never really formally trained, that means your life is pretty much a recovery period. Coming right out of the recovery phase, you enter the transition period, which is what I'm currently in. I'm in week 8 of my transition period, and that's the last week. I think about it in terms of tricking your body into being active again.
So when you're in your transition period, which I have yet to get out of because I'm not the best at training, you are working on increasing your aerobic capacity, your aerobic volume. So essentially, you can do more work at a lower perceived exertion because you can work at a higher heart rate. Additionally, you work on some general strength training. You're just trying to get your body in shape and trying to condition yourself to transition, hence transition period, into your base period of training.
After that comes the base period, and this is the period that Sir Stephen and Scott refer to as the money in the bank period. This is when you're still increasing your load, and by load I mean cardio load. You're clocking like tons and tons and tons of time in Zone 1 and Zone 2. And this is all in an attempt to get your body to respond and get better at doing cardio, or that low and slow pace that my objective relies on so heavily. Whew, I'm out of breath. How far would you say we have left to go, Tyler?
Yes.
We're yes away from the summit, and might as well explain the specific period, which is basically when you're coming out of the base period and you're within a month of doing your objective. The specific period is basically comprised of 2 really big workouts a week with some basic strength and core maintenance sprinkled in. I have no idea how this is gonna look for me, or even if I'm gonna be able to do it. It's kind of an optional period. There's the taper week. Shit. God, I'm really bad at this. And after the specific period, there's the taper period, where you basically wean yourself off of the drug called Zexercise and let your body, and I'm quoting Stevis here, absorb the stimulus. And basically you'll go into a cocoon of energy goo and come out a butterfly of sendage. And then after that is basically what you've been training for. It's what the recovery, the transition period, the base period, the specific and the taper period are for. And that's a week or 2 of exercising at your maximum. And that's when you ascend Everest, or you shred the gnar, you climb the thing, and hopefully that's when Gert sends the Grand Traverse. But we'll see. So that was skiing glory. Super fun. A really great way to send off the month. It was really fun to see all those friends, you know. Out here during COVID, that's kind of like the only way to see people who you don't live with. So it's just another reason why I ski so much. How did this month go? It's the end of the video. It's the end of the month. Let's check in. All in all, it went pretty well. About a week ago, I kind of re-aggravated my shoulder doing some yoga, ironically, and I'm going to probably have to move around the strength training schedule a little bit, probably take a couple weeks off from strength training, but stay on top of my cardio. I'm a little nervous going into the base period. I'm going to see like a 20% increase in the amount of cardio that I've been doing, and that's a little nerve-wracking. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I've got 1 week left of no coffee. I was able to do this past week with no coffee. It was a little hard at the beginning, but now we're here and I feel pretty good. Thanks for watching. Thanks for making it this far. I really appreciate it. The previous video for the month of October is on my channel. You can go check it out. If you like what you see here, please subscribe. Oh, that feels weird saying that. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.